Will you start by telling us your kind of journey to how you are where you are at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a BYU student. I did my undergrad there. I'm currently a PhD student. I am in the middle of writing my dissertation, so I'm almost finished up at BYU. But basically, the way this got started was in my uh, starting my senior year as an undergrad. I was in the middle of working with Dr. Tim Jenkins. And in that process, we realized we could kind of have a new diagnostic application for Alzheimer's disease. And so I met with him. I said, "Hey, I think we have some really cool stuff." It was based off the research we were doing at the time. And he encouraged me to participate in various like business events that BYU has. So, like the entrepreneurship school has, I'm trying to remember what they call it. I think it's the big idea pitch is what they have.
Yes. Yeah.
So I participated in that and I won that. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then I did SIOY 2 years ago and won SIOY with the kind of project we were working on in his lab. So after that happened, I was still planning on going to med school. I was still gonna kind of take my money and run with it, kind of. And we actually had a bunch of VC firms approach both Tim and I, Dr. Jenkins and I, and say, hey, we think this could really kind of take off for the diagnostic space. So it wasn't really until then that we decided to found a company. So that was uh, let's see, that was April in 2022. We decided to found the company that we run now. And so we got funding after winning SIOY, and it has grown much bigger than that first Alzheimer's project that we did then. But yeah, that was kind of the story of how we got it started. And since then, we've grown super quick. So our company just got valued at 114 million, and we just raised 23 million dollars, and we're hiring out a really awesome team, and we finished up a lab up in Heber, and we're in the middle of kind of building out it's like a 20,000 square foot lab. So it started growing really quick, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That's
So
amazing. That is amazing.
It's incredible.
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, as you were like developing this technology for Alzheimer's, like what were some of the challenges that you faced, or more, were there like any roadblocks, or how did you, I don't know, overcome some of those harder parts of getting into like the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as an undergrad, I was just familiar with the science side. So,
Mhm.
and Tim was the same way. So we lacked a lot of the business experience, especially early on. And so I'd say those were the first roadblocks. Was once we found out the science worked and we could diagnose or identify early Alzheimer's disease, we were really worried about like how do you take it to market at that point. And that was actually the number one reason why we weren't starting the company, is we didn't have that really good business expertise. Um, but when we found the right VC partners, their name is actually Union Capital Partners, so they're out of Utah. Those two guys that run that company came in and were like, "Hey, we'll help you on the business side," and so they had a lot of legal and business experience. And then we partnered with a couple other really good firms of people that started billion-dollar labs, and even some really cool people here in Utah, like one of the founders of like the Maverick gas station, which is so random, but
That's random.
he is he is so awesome. So basically, me as a fairly young CEO was just, to me, it feels like through luck, I was able to find some really good um, business advisors who had started very successful companies, and were just really excited to kind of help me learn how to be a good CEO and help us kind of grow on the business side. So I'd say that was the biggest hurdle from a science perspective. Surprisingly, I don't think there weren't as many major hurdles as you'd expect from a science standpoint. And if you talk to Tim about it, and also Dr. Hill. So Dr. Hill and Jonathan Hill and Tim Jenkins are both kind of founders in these companies. And they will both tell you, just like I will, that there was a lot of inspiration involved where we were working on things totally different than Alzheimer's disease and just totally felt inspired, like, oh, we can apply this to the neurodegenerative disease, and it kind of went from there. So it's been surprisingly quick from a science side, but we all feel like it's because we have a good team that felt very inspired on a lot of stuff. So
That's
That's
amazing.
amazing. So you talked about how you didn't know a lot about the business side. I don't know how much you know about BYU TTO, but we do work with a lot of students who are kind of in your same shoes where they're super involved in the STEM aspect of things, but they don't know how to get involved and network pertaining to the entrepreneurial aspect. What would you recommend for those students in order to make those connections and kind of just take that step into the business world?
yeah, absolutely. So I was in the same boat. So I'll first speak to kind of some important like assets that
Yeah,
BYU has. So
absolutely.
um, there's that bioinnovations class that I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that at all,
Not
but it's a class where I actually helped Dr. Jenkins teach it for a while. So it's Cell 444 and Cell 445, and it's designed for students in the STEM fields that have a strong science background but don't know the business background. And all that class does is basically for a full year, they bring in experts in STEM who are on the business side to come in and teach about, hey, what does it look like to get, legal, like how do you do legal stuff in the STEM field? We even bring in, I think it's Mike is the name, right? Mike Brown. He's over at Tech
Yeah,
Transfer.
yeah,
Yeah, he comes in and teaches,
yeah.
hey, what does it look like to get IP put together? We bring in, or they bring in marketing people, and they've got some really, really awesome people that have started just massive companies in the STEM field that come in and just teach students how to do that.
Yeah.
The second half of the course is all about how do you start a company.
Yeah.
Because I'd say the hardest thing for students who want to get into it is most founders in the STEM field have been in it for 20, 30 years. I mean, they are PhDs or professors that have researched for so long,
Yeah.
and it's hard to do that as a student. And so it focuses on a lot on how you can partner with, professors and people with experience. So that class was great. Other entrepreneurship stuff at BYU that was awesome is early on I participated in the Seed Launchpad program. SIOY was awesome, and so was the Big Idea Pitch. So more than anything, I would just apply for those opportunities. Whether you win or not is
Yeah.
irrelevant, because all my BYU connections came from just participating in those. Like the funding we got through SIOY and even just the funding to do research. I got involved with the Cura grant early on. So like I did everything you probably could do from an entrepreneur side. And I won some stuff, other stuff I didn't even get close to. But every single thing I did, some relationship came out of it that was super valuable. And it was on the business side.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Good information. Thank you.
Yeah, that is really valuable, I think, for students to know. And it's really awesome that you were able to get so much experience in BYU. And I guess you didn't even anticipate, I guess, having this business. You were thinking about the medical field. So
Yeah.
kind of in that aspect, like where do you see your business in like the next 5 to 10 years? Like what are some of your goals?
Yeah, so we want to grow it we want it to be $1 billion business.
Mhm.
That is our goal. But I'd say from like a more cliche is our goal is to change the way diagnostics are done. So everything we do is in the diagnostic space. So how to diagnose Alzheimer's disease earlier. We even do things in women's health and Lyme's disease and cancer detection. So we do a lot of stuff now that started with just Alzheimer's disease. Um, but that's our goal. If we can drastically change the way diagnostics are performed for physicians, that's our goal. And then if we pull that off, obviously the valuation of the company will follow, but we care a lot more about changing the way that that's done. So.
It's amazing. So I feel like nowadays it's just a rite of passage that you need to mention AI. So
Uh-huh.
with the development of AI, how do you see it impacting your specific field as you focus on the neurodegenerative diseases and things like that?
It's super important. And even so, there's a lot of AI in the business world that's super valuable in terms of like better accounting and better marketing. We use all those tools like everyone else does. Just makes it so you're more efficient and really you don't have to pay as many people to do as many jobs. But from a science standpoint, I think they're still trying to figure a lot of it out. What we do is we could call it AI, but it's really more of still like traditional machine learning where you can feed it immense amounts of biological data and have it give you an output. I'd say there's still a lot of limitations because one thing about AI is like in the Alzheimer's space, for example, there's a lot of really cool AI tools that have come out where they feed it a bunch of data like proteomic data and DNA data, and it can give like risk assessments, and it's really accurate. It says, oh, we know with 97% accuracy that this person could get Alzheimer's disease, but a doctor has no idea what to do with it, right? They're like,
Insane.
well, I don't know if they will, or so. Um, I would say AI in life sciences needs to still figure out how to make the AI reports biologically actionable. That's kind of the buzzword we always hear from physicians, where they're like, "Hey, we love AI, but I need to know how I can treat people based off of it." So in our case, the AI models we use predicts or like the level of neuron cell death, so doctor knows exactly how many neurons are dying and know how to treat it and stuff. So that was a long answer to I think it's really valuable
Yeah.
and I think people are still trying to make it biologically actionable in a lot of cases, but once they do, I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I feel like we've just covered so much ground in talking about your um technology and your business. Do you feel like there is anything super valuable or like a most valuable lesson that you feel like you learned that would be really useful either for STEM students who have an idea or business students who want to head in kind of the similar direction with starting their own company? Like, do you have any like best advice?
yeah, for me, it was don't worry so much about equity. I've met a lot of students that they have a great idea and they are so stressed about giving up
Wow.
50, 60, 70% of the
Yeah.
equity
Yeah.
because they're like, my idea. And like in my company, I only own 20%, and I think it's the best decision ever to be willing to give equity to great people because without it, it's so hard to grow a business. Um, and a lot of times, as the scientist, as the inventor, you feel like you should own a lot more. But as you go through it, you realize like it is impossible to start an idea without people who have a strong legal background or a strong business background. And so it always takes five, six, seven people to have equity to actually have it be a really good idea. So that's always my advice to students is stress less about how much equity you own and a lot more about like the people you're working with and be more than happy to give them equity. So
Yeah. That's something you don't hear every day. So I feel like that'll be very valuable.
yeah.
Um, Obviously we know that you have leadership roles at Resonant, Wasatch Biolabs, and Renew Biotechnologies. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience at each company?
Yeah, just in terms of like the type of leaders that we had to go hire or
Yeah,
what
yeah.
specific. Okay.
Whatever you think would be the most valuable.
Yeah. So leadership is a unique thing where at least at our company, we really look to find younger leadership who have advisors that they can work with.
Yeah.
So most of our leadership team is, early 30s or even under 30.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh,
but the important thing for that, for all of those, I guess it's been important, but it's also been the harder part is finding the right advisors to work on those projects. So Wasatch Biolabs is it's a high throughput lab, and we had to go find someone to guide that team who had started a lab before and knew what it was like to process thousands of samples a day
Yeah.
through a lab. For Renew, some of those roles looked a little different. That's actually where the CFO of Maverick came in. Is he was really familiar with, inventory. He was retired, and he was able to help our current CFO know how to, manage a company at scale. Even though he was experienced, he didn't have 45 years of experience with other CFOs. So that's how ours has been, is having really driven young leaders with retired experienced advisors who are willing to just be their personal advisors and help them know how to grow into that role.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with creating these leadership teams and like finding these younger people, how did you make those connections and like know who you wanted to have helping you?
Yeah, so the vast majority just came from relationships throughout the years. So, someone on our science team has a buddy who is really interested in what we do. And so we interviewed him and we liked him. 90% of our hires up until now have been like that. Some of the key hires, we actually used a talent agency who helped us go find advisors or, you know, um, chief or like executive positions who are coming from other really successful companies. They've been awesome, although I like that approach less. It's a lot scarier to hire someone who is coming from a company you aren't familiar with and you didn't have time to spend with them. So we'll probably have to do that more and more as we grow. But right now, all of our hires have just come largely from BYU and our relationships with BYU and finding great people through some BYU connection. Yeah.
Amazing. So you talked about it earlier in the interview, but obviously you are developing this extremely like beneficial and valuable diagnostic for Alzheimer's disease. As people who are not super familiar with STEM, can you give us just a brief rundown of what that is? And you mentioned that you guys are obviously scaling at an insane rate and you're able to build that 20,000, was it 20,000?
Yep.
Yeah,
20,000
that
square
lab.
feet. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
So
Yeah.
so go into detail about that process, kind of how it came to be, and then we talked long term, but short term, there's some exciting things around the corner. So what do you think that'll look like?
Yeah. So with that technology, the way it works is pretty straightforward. It's not as complicated as people would think, but basically when neurons die or any cell in our body dies, they essentially spill their guts into the bloodstream. So all the DNA and proteins and lipid, whatever's involved, ends up in that bloodstream. And our technology focuses on identifying the DNA that came from those dying cells. So we take out everything we do is blood plasma based. So we extract all the DNA in the blood plasma, so all that floating around DNA, we call it cell-free DNA. And we developed a method where we can take all that DNA and tell you what cell in the body it came from. And so we focus a lot on the brain. And so we take all the DNA and we check to see if any of that DNA is coming from specific neurons in the brain. So if it's coming from cortical neurons or dopaminergic neurons or even things like oligodendrocytes, and we just quantify the amount that's in the blood. So if there's a lot, that's not normal. So if you have a lot of cortical neurons dying, we see a lot of cortical neuron DNA in the blood, and that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. And we actually are applying it to a lot of diseases outside of Alzheimer's disease right now. So to answer your question about short-term stuff, what we're focused on over the summer is we're focused on building we call it the neuro panel on our team, but basically building a one size fits all test for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS. And so it's a blood draw that we can check to see if there's any neurons dying that are associated specifically with Parkinson's disease or like spinal motor neurons that are associated with ALS and obviously the Alzheimer's stuff as well. So we're actually planning like a $2 to $3 million clinical trial starting in June for that project, and we're really excited about it. So
That is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, I had no idea how your technology worked. So that is actually so fascinating. And kind of talking a little bit about that, who is your market? Can you explain that to me a little bit more? Is this something that you're selling to like health centers and they're giving to patients, or is it more individuals? Like, who are you marketing to?
Yeah, so our end goal is doctors. So our end goal is to sell to doctors or like physician networks like Intermountain Healthcare, who, employ all the doctors. In the meantime, it takes a while to get to that point. So we do plan on, doing some like, we've had a lot of people reach out that want to get tested, knowing that, we're going to get it to physicians. So we will have the ability for people to take it in like a research phase as we're in the process of getting it to doctors. But yeah, you kind of hit it on the head. We will be selling it to physicians directly or physician networks or even functional health networks like Humana and Optum and networks like that. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's our plan.
That's amazing. Well, lastly, while we wrap up, are there any last piece of advice that you give to students that were once in your shoes and aspiring entrepreneurs or STEM students?
Yeah, so if it's STEM students, I would say if you're not involved in research right now, absolutely get involved. And make sure when you are getting involved, don't just get involved with any type of research. I'd like spend time meeting with professors and more importantly, find a professor that has the same type of growth trajectory as you do. Some professors love the idea of students taking their own ideas and growing them, and other professors are more traditional and just want you to focus on, their projects and publishing a paper and nothing else. So that's my opinion, is find a research lab that is excited to let you try your own projects. So, and then from an entrepreneurship side, I kind of already told you, it's find people that are passionate and be willing to give up equity, especially early on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We'll let you go, but we appreciate you being here